Attorneys are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression than the general public. That's a pretty large proportion more. It's not just depression. It can be, well, it's not to dismiss depression, but it can lead to really severe results. So suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for attorneys, and this is only after cancer and heart disease. So this is a very serious issue facing the legal profession. Also, we see that suicide rates are 6 times the rate of the general population. So what does this mean for us? It means recognizing the warning signs is essential. We want to spot warning signs in ourselves and in our peers when they are presented to us. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, how to spot potential warning signs and how to address those, both in others and in ourselves. So some more unfortunate statistics. Attorneys are about twice as likely to be chemically dependent as the general population. And chemically dependent means both alcoholism and other forms of substance abuse or reliance. 1 in 6 attorneys is chemically dependent on drugs or substances. That's nearly double the general population. And I think it comes as maybe no surprise to all of us. We've heard this over and over again in competence presentations that alcoholism is prescient in our profession, and it's a 30% factor in suicides in our profession. And when it comes to disciplinary procedures as well before the bar, 50% of them are linked to chemical dependency. So the long-term and far-reaching effects of chemical dependency are very clear here with these statistics. So substance abuse is a complex disease of the brain and body. It goes as far as altering a person's brain chemistry. So our brains release chemicals in response to certain stimuli, like hunger and thirst, and this will also cause a pleasure response. And most addictive substances release these same chemicals. So, for example, substance dependence contains or can result in altered brain chemistry, so rewiring your reward centers, craving for mood-altering substances, maybe a loss of control, both on a substance or when experiencing withdrawals from it. And it can actually occur at the core of our brain, not in the frontal lobes, where rational decision-making occurs and where we like to think of ourselves as attorneys. But an example of this is the opioid epidemic, which can actually affect the brainstem, which regulates critical body functions such as heartbeat. So Leslie, again, spoke about this a little bit earlier. A 2016 study of 12,825 attorneys across the United States is revealing approximately 1.2 million lawyers, more than 250,000 of these lawyers are depressed. And this begs the question, which came first, the depression or the substance abuse problem, and how are these interlinked together? Approximately 1/3 of working attorneys are problem drinkers, and a large percentage of working attorneys in the U.S. also experience anxiety and stress. And for those of us who are lucky enough to work in private practice, we experience the highest rates of problem drinking and depression in the industry. More wonderful statistics and numbers for us. Attorneys are 3.6 times more likely to suffer from mental illness. And 70% of law students, this all goes all the way back to our law school education, are depressed during law school. But even though all of these numbers are a little bit alarming, there is a silver lining. We are not alone. We are all in this together, and so we have tools and mechanisms to deal with these issues. And I said earlier, these issues start appearing early in our career paths as attorneys. It starts in law school. It appears to intensify law school's tendencies to ignore emotions, interpersonal concerns, and interpersonal relationships. I mean, I don't know what your law school experience was like, but mine wasn't always sunshine and roses. It was a little bit stressful, and it was a lot of hard work and long hours, very competitive. And so it's another chicken and egg example. Does law school attract type A personalities, or does it create type A personalities? And how does that interact with these other traits that emerge over time? And I don't know how many of you are, again, in private practice. I can speak from my experience. I have an enormous workload, and this is definitely a stressor for me. And workload, time constraints, our experience dealing with opposing counsel or colleagues, or the pressure from wanting to perform well for our clients. All of these things are stressors and can be paths toward addiction. And again, it can be from anywhere. It's not always just, if you might not be a litigator to have to experience these issues. And it's easy to be in denial about these as well. It's easy to just sort of say, I'm doing my job, it's okay, I will forge on. But again, we'll talk about some of the ways we can identify these issues in ourselves and others.
So why do we deny the problems? We're lawyers, and we actually like proof before we go forward with anything. So we're looking for evidence, we are set up to be the people that others look to for answers, not the ones who are actually looking for them for ourselves. So we're the fixers, not the people with the problem, which is not. I mean, that's obviously a setup for ignoring what we need to do for ourselves. We have, many of us, a strong need to be in control. It's a control-related profession. We have a tendency to argue, I know, shocking, and to rationalize. So denial is highly developed and deeply entrenched in the way that we practice law and the way we're taught to practice law. And we're educated, and many of us feel, well, we're too smart to get addicted, or we're too smart to have a mental illness. And that mental health issues and addiction are not linked, as we well know, to how much education we have or how much money we have. We're also, though, trained to keep secrets. And so there's a big fear of admission around these problems. And that's part of what the ABA is trying to break down, is that fear-based concern that people are going to judge us for having an issue, and then we don't deal with it. So afflictive emotions distort our reality, and that's part of how we are trained. Again, we are trained in law school. Most law school training is around litigation types of practices, even though many of us don't end up being litigators. We are trained to go to war in one way or another. Even when we're providing advice, we are actually advocating in a way that's not, we shouldn't be weak, but part of what we think is being weak is having an emotion, which is not an indicator of being weak. It's an indicator of being human, which I'm pretty sure all of us in this room are. We aren't given any tools in our educational process to deal with the trauma of being an attorney, and believe me, there is a lot. We are carrying other people's problems every single day in addition to our own, and there is no training still now, as far as I know, in how to handle that. Other people who are in professions where there is a high level of stress and trauma, like social workers and psychologists and doctors and nurses, they're taught about compassion fatigue and things like that. We don't get that education. Not to say that it works for them all the time either, but we don't even have the most basic tools provided for us. And we also have that constant fear of failure. So I would ask you right now, what are you addicted to? Because addiction, we think of it as, the opioid epidemic and alcohol, but there's a lot of other things that may invoke similar types of behavior, and this little drawing here shows news, shopping, sugar, these things that we can't put down, social media, gaming, listening to the news 24/7 and the cycle. I just, for a minute, stop and think about what the things are that you're using to avoid doing whatever it is that you should otherwise be doing or you want to be doing. That time that you spend scrolling through your screen, and leaving an hour later than you needed to because you couldn't pull yourself away. So just a thought about that.
So now we're going to be talking a little bit about symptoms that you can identify both in yourself and in others. I won't list everything here. You all have handouts, but as Leslie mentioned, addiction and substance abuse take many forms, so these might not all be applicable. Some things might be bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, deterioration of physical appearance. I know I've seen that in colleagues before. Secretive or unusual behavior, an unusual need for money or sudden mood changes. And this was modified by John Hopkins. It's sort of a list of questions that was adapted from Alcoholics Anonymous. And there are a number of questions you can ask yourself, both for yourself or for others. Is drinking, drug use, or any one of those other potentially addictive behaviors, are they interfering with your work? Are you doing it alone? Is it decreasing your desire to do things that you like or go out, be ambitious or efficient? Is it increasing in quantity? Is it getting worse, not better? Other potential questions that you can ask. Is it making you or others feel guilty, depressed, or anxious? Is it interfering with your personal relationships, either at work or at home? Is it leading to lies or hiding the amount that is being consumed or amount that is being engaged in a particular activity? And then one of the points that stood out to me is what happens after consumption or if you stop. So what happens if you just stopped? Can you? What would happen if it did?